You are listening to the Objects of Affection collection. Study 21, The Luster Restored, a critical dialogue with Dana Thomas and the rise of the post-luxury paradigm. In 2007, the landscape of luxury critique was irrevocably altered by the publication of Dana Thomas's Deluxe, How Luxury Lost Its Luster. More than a mere journalistic exposé, the book served as a definitive diagnosis of a profound systemic crisis, a cultural post-mortem for an industry that had, in the pursuit of unprecedented profits, seemingly traded its soul for global market share. Thomas, a veteran culture and fashion correspondent, gave voice and evidentiary weight to a sentiment that had been percolating among discerning consumers and industry observers for years, that the very essence of luxury was being hollowed out from within. Her work, which quickly achieved bestseller status, became the seminal text for understanding this degradation. Thomas's core argument was as compelling as it was damning. She meticulously chronicled the late 20th century transformation of luxury from a constellation of small, family-run, quality-obsessed artisanal houses into a consolidated global industry, dominated by a few publicly traded conglomerates. This corporate capture, led by behemoths like LVMH, Moet Hennessy, Louis Vuitton, LVMH, and Kering, fundamentally shifted the industry's logic from one of craft to one of capital. The new mandate was shareholder value, which demanded relentless growth. This growth was achieved, Thomas argued, through a strategy of democratization, targeting the aspirational middle class with entry-level, high-margin, logo-driven accessories like handbags and perfumes. In this new paradigm, marketing narratives and the illusion of scarcity became more critical than material integrity. As Thomas noted, perceived quality eclipsed real quality. The widespread outsourcing of production to lower-cost regions further severed the vital link between a brand's heritage and its tangible output, completing the dilution of its authenticity. The luster that luxury lost, in Thomas's final analysis, was its exclusivity, its commitment to superior craftsmanship, and its very claim to authenticity. This article proposes that we are now living through the definitive response to the crisis Thomas diagnosed. The contemporary post-luxury paradigm, characterized by the ethos of quiet luxury, is a direct and necessary market-led rebellion against the hollowing out of luxury's meaning and quality. It is not a fleeting trend, but a significant cultural and economic correction, a historical effort to restore the luster that was lost. This movement represents a radical re-internalization of value, a deliberate shift away from the external signifier of the corporate logo and back towards the intrinsic, and less easily commodified, qualities of superior craftsmanship, narrative depth, and authentic connoisseurship. To understand the profundity of this shift, one must first recognize that the tension between luxury as a corrupting force and luxury, as a marker of excellence, is not a modern invention, but a philosophical fault line that runs through the very bedrock of Western thought. The ancient fault line, debating luxury from Plato's Republic to the Enlightenment, the contemporary schism between the loud, logocentric luxury of the corporate era and the quiet, quality-focused ethos of the post-luxury paradigm, is but the latest manifestation of a philosophical conflict that is thousands of years old. The anxieties surrounding luxury, its relationship to virtue, its impact on social cohesion, and its role in the economy are not unique to our age. They are rooted in a foundational debate that has shaped Western civilization's understanding of the good life and the just society, a debate that stretches from the dialogues of ancient Athens to the pamphlets of the Enlightenment. The Socratic critique, luxury as a threat to civic virtue, the foundational critique of luxury in the Western canon, can be traced to Plato's Republic. In his search for the nature of justice, Socrates constructs in speech a model city. He begins with what he calls the true or healthy city, a modest society built on the principle of specialization, where individuals fulfill the basic necessities of human life: food, shelter and clothing, and little else. It is a community of functional simplicity and sustainable consumption, living within the natural limits of necessity. This ideal is immediately challenged by Socrates' interlocutor Glaucon, who dismisses it as a city of pigs, fit only for animals because it lacks the comforts and refinements of civilized life. He demands couches, tables, perfumes, and pastries. In short, he demands luxury. Socrates reluctantly agrees to explore this more complex city, which he terms the luxurious or feverish city. This transition marks a critical turning point in the dialogue. The introduction of luxury, of desires that have overstepped the limit of their necessities, sets off a chain reaction of consequences that threaten the city's very foundation. To satisfy these new and limitless desires, the city must seize land from its neighbors, leading inevitably to war. This, in turn, necessitates the creation of a professional army, the guardian class, to defend the city's expanding territory and accumulated wealth. For Plato, the problem is not merely logistical but moral and psychological. The pursuit of luxury cultivates pleonexia, an insatiable greed or covetousness in the souls of the citizens. This obsessive love of property and wealth becomes the primary civic value, supplanting the pursuit of justice and virtue. It breeds factionalism, corrupts the soul, and ultimately undermines the unity and moral health essential for a just state. For Plato, the conclusion is stark. The adulation of wealth and the practice of civic virtue are fundamentally opposed forces. Plato's feverish city provides the archetypal framework for all subsequent critiques of consumer culture, including the one articulated by Dana Thomas. The transition from the healthy city of craft to the feverish city of mass luxury is not merely an ancient thought experiment, but a direct philosophical precedent for the industrial transformation of the 20th century. The fever Plato describes is the artificial stimulation of superfluous desire, the very engine of modern marketing. The endless acquisition of money, he warns against, is the modern shareholder mandate that prioritizes quarterly profits above all else. The loss of the true city is the loss of authentic craftsmanship in favor of outsourced, mass-produced goods. Thomas's Chronicle of Luxury's decline can thus be read as a contemporary account of this ancient transition, where the tangible substance of value is replaced by the feverish illusion of the brand. The Enlightenment Schism. Mandeville's engine vs. Rousseau's chains the Platonic critique of luxury as a moral and civic threat echoed for centuries. But it was during the Enlightenment that the debate was reignited and codified into two diametrically opposed economic and moral philosophies. This period saw the rise of commercial society, and with it, an urgent need to reconcile the pursuit of wealth with the demands of virtue. The most provocative and influential defense of luxury came from Bernard Mandeville in his 1714 satirical work, The Fable of the Bees, or Private Vices, Public Benefits. Through the allegory of a beehive, Mandeville advanced a shocking paradox that would become a cornerstone of capitalist thought. He described a bustling, prosperous hive that thrived on the very behaviors condemned by classical moralists: greed, pride, vanity, and envy. When the bees, stricken with guilt, pray to the gods to be made virtuous, their prayers are answered. They become honest, frugal, and content. The result is catastrophic. The economy collapses, industries vanish, and the once great society dwindles into a simple, impoverished, and insignificant existence. Mandeville's moral was clear and deeply unsettling to his contemporaries. Fraud, luxury, and pride must live, while we the benefits receive. He argued that the selfish passions and the desire for luxury were not societal ills, but were in fact the essential engines of a powerful, civilized, and prosperous commercial society. The prodigality of the libertine, he argued, gives work to tailors, servants, and cooks. Personal greed fuels innovation and industry. For Mandeville, private vices were the necessary precondition for public prosperity. In direct opposition to this view stood Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who can be seen as the Enlightenment's most potent heir to the Platonic critique. In his discourse on the origin and basis of inequality among men, Rousseau identified the dawn of private property as the origin of social strife and moral decay. Luxury, for Rousseau, was a primary symptom and accelerant of this decay. It is a corrupting force that creates vast social inequalities, dividing society into the decadent rich and the servile poor. Far from strengthening the state, as Mandeville argued, Rousseau contended that luxury weakens it from within. It effeminizes men, distracts them from their civic duties, and renders them unfit for public service, making them slaves to comfort and appearance. This schism between Mandeville's engine and Rousseau's chains established the core intellectual tension that continues to define our relationship with luxury. Is it a dynamic force for economic progress, harnessing human self-interest for the collective good? Or is it a corrupting agent of social inequality and moral decline? The history of the luxury industry in the late 20th century can be read as the story of the market delivering a decisive, if perhaps temporary, victory to Mandeville. The age of consolidation. How the corporation captured luxury. The late 20th century witnessed the practical triumph of the Mandevillian argument, as the philosophical debate over luxury was effectively settled in the boardroom and on the stock exchange. An unprecedented wave of corporatization swept through the industry, fundamentally restructuring it from a collection of artisanal workshops into a global, publicly traded oligopoly. This was the age of consolidation, an era in which the logic of the corporation captured and redefined the meaning of luxury itself. The rise of the conglomerates. LVMH, Kering, and the shareholder mandate. The consolidation of the luxury market was driven by the formation and aggressive expansion of a few powerful conglomerates, most notably LVMH in France, and later Kering, then known as Pinot Printemps Redoute or PPR. LVMH was formed in 1987 through the merger of fashion house Louis Vuitton and wines and spirits group Moet Hennessy, and under the visionary, often ruthless, leadership of Bernard Arnault, it embarked on a strategic acquisition spree. Similarly, François Pinault transformed his timber and retail group into a luxury powerhouse, beginning with the landmark acquisition of a controlling stake in the Gucci Group in 1999. These conglomerates systematically acquired and integrated dozens of small, independent, and often family-run artisanal houses, from Fendi and Celine to Gucci and Saint Laurent. The strategic goal was to build diversified portfolios of iconic brands that could achieve unparalleled market dominance. This structure allowed them to leverage immense economies of scale in key areas like global advertising, prime retail real estate, and supply chain management, creating a competitive landscape in which smaller independent brands struggled to survive. This structural transformation, however, was more than a change in ownership. It was a fundamental change in purpose. The transition from private family stewardship to the domain of publicly traded corporations introduced the unrelenting pressure of the shareholder mandate. The primary objective was no longer the patient, multi-generational cultivation of a craft or a name, but the delivery of consistent, quarterly growth and the maximization of profit margins. This new logic, prioritizing mass production, global brand visibility and financial returns, stood in stark opposition to the traditional ethos of luxury, which was predicated on rarity, patience, and an uncompromising focus on quality, a dynamic explored in the Paris Fashion Week paradox. Dana Thomas's diagnosis, the Deluxe thesis. It was this new corporate reality that Dana Thomas so expertly dissected in Deluxe. Her book stands as the definitive journalistic chronicle of the consequences of this consolidation, a detailed account of how the pursuit of profit diluted the very product it was selling. At the heart of Thomas's thesis is the concept of the democratization of luxury. To fuel the growth demanded by shareholders, conglomerates aggressively targeted the aspirational middle class. They did so by creating a hierarchy of goods, with the most accessible and profitable items being entry-level, logo-emblazoned accessories, handbags, wallets, perfumes, and sunglasses. These items, with their high margins and mass appeal, became the cash cows of the industry, but their ubiquity began to erode the exclusivity that had always been luxury's defining characteristic. This strategy necessitated a monumental shift in focus from product to promotion. Thomas argues that marketing, celebrity endorsements, and the carefully constructed illusion of scarcity became more important than the actual quality of the goods, leading to the scarcity paradox. The brand story, amplified by billion-dollar advertising campaigns, was the primary value proposition. The physical object was often secondary. This inversion of priorities was coupled with a revolution in production. To protect and expand profit margins, manufacturing was widely outsourced to factories in lower-cost countries. This practice, often shielded from public view, severed the crucial link between a brand's cherished European heritage narrative and its actual globalized manufacturing process, further hollowing out its claims to authenticity and artisanal provenance. The ultimate consequence, as Thomas powerfully concludes, was that luxury lost its luster. The very qualities that once defined it, true exclusivity, deep-rooted authenticity, and a foundation in superior, often handmade craftsmanship, were systematically sacrificed at the altar of corporate growth. The industry had become a victim of its own success, creating a widespread state of exhaustion. This corporate model, however, contained the seeds of its own undoing. In transforming luxury goods from objects of intrinsic value into mere signifiers of status, the logo, the conglomerates made that status profoundly vulnerable. The primary tool for growth, the democratization of the logo, was also a mechanism for its devaluation. The value of any status symbol is predicated on its relative scarcity. By selling the logo to the masses, the conglomerates engaged in a process of cultural hyperinflation. The more logos they sold, the less each individual logo was worth in terms of signaling elite status. For the most discerning and high-value consumers, the very individuals who set trends and confer legitimacy, differentiation could no longer be achieved through a symbol that was now ubiquitous. This elite segment was thus compelled to seek a new mode of distinction, creating a market vacuum that could only be filled by a return to that which cannot be easily democratized: deep knowledge of rare materials, an appreciation for invisible craftsmanship, and access to truly exclusive, low-volume products. The post-luxury rebellion was not merely a reaction. It was the inevitable and necessary market correction to the hyperinflation of the logo. The rebellion of taste, post-luxury as a corrective force. The world that Dana Thomas described, a world of mass-produced, marketing-driven, logo-centric luxury, did not go unchallenged. The very success of the corporate model created the conditions for a powerful counter-movement. This rebellion of taste, now understood as the post-luxury paradigm, is a direct, market-driven reaction against the dilution of luxury's meaning. It represents a conscious and deliberate effort by a new generation of brands and a highly sophisticated consumer segment to restore the luster by regrounding the concept of luxury in tangible, intrinsic, and authentic value. Defining the new paradigm. From loud luxury to quiet luxury, the dominant aesthetic of the post-luxury paradigm is quiet luxury, a term often used interchangeably with stealth wealth. Its core characteristics form a point-by-point refutation of the Deluxe era's values. It is defined by an understated elegance that rejects overt branding and conspicuous logos. Value is located not in a visible emblem, but in the inherent quality of the object itself. A profound focus on superior and often rare materials like vicuña or baby cashmere, an emphasis on impeccable craftsmanship and perfect tailoring, and a timeless aesthetic that transcends the frantic cycle of seasonal trends. This aesthetic represents a conscious move away from the conspicuous consumption that Thorstein Veblen famously identified, a mode of signaling status to the masses. Instead, quiet luxury is a form of inconspicuous consumption, designed to signal status and taste only to a select group of peers who possess the cultural capital to recognize and appreciate its subtle cues. The perfect drape of a fabric, the hand-finished stitching on a lapel, the specific softness of a rare wool. Where the loud luxury of the corporate era shouted wealth to everyone, quiet luxury whispers it to a select few. It is a rebellion rooted in the desire for differentiation, not through assimilation with a popular brand, but through disassociation from the mainstream and the cultivation of genuine connoisseurship. This shift represents a fundamental reordering of values. In the Deluxe era, the primary source of value was external, the brand logo and its associated marketing narrative, which conferred a perceived status upon the owner. Consumer motivation was therefore driven by conspicuous consumption and social assimilation, a desire to signal one's place in the aspirational hierarchy. The core aesthetic was consequently overt, logo-centric, and trend-driven, a loud proclamation of brand affiliation. This was supported by a production model of mass manufacturing and outsourcing, focused relentlessly on expanding profit margins. The relationship between brand and consumer was largely transactional and aspirational, selling a dream of inclusion, with key signifiers being instantly recognizable handbags, branded perfumes, and ubiquitous celebrity endorsements. The remainder of this study continues at objectsofaffectioncollection.com. This has been a study from the Objects of Affection Collection, a critical art research institution operating under the framework of post-luxury conceptual functional art. Read the full research at objectsofaffectioncollection.com.